Everyone, welcome back to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. So there's a new movie coming out in the UK very soon that I really have to tell you about because it's really quite sublime. It's called Waves. It's written and directed by Trey Edward Shults, who made the brilliantly paranoid viral thriller It Comes at Night from 2017 that you may have watched. If you didn't see it, I highly recommend that you go and watch it. Waves stars Kelvin Harrison Jr., who was also in It Comes at Night, and I had the great privilege of interviewing both Schultz and Harrison Jr. for this film, and both of them were really wonderful to talk to. You can see my interview with them soon on Cineworld. So whereas It Comes at Night kind of shrank inwards, Waves, as the title of the film implies, kind of washes over the viewer in sort of euphoric tides of visuals and emotion, and it's really quite a remarkable piece of work. It's an original story, as I said, written and directed by Schultz, which centres on an African American family in America, in Florida. We begin with Kelvin Harrison Jr. As the teenage son Tyler, who is a very high achieving teenager, appears very popular. He is participating in his high school wrestling tournaments. He is being pushed by his somewhat strict father, brilliantly played by Sterling K. Brown, who is acutely aware of how difficult it is for an African American family to make their way in contemporary America. He also pushes Tyler's sister, played by Taylor Russell, who is a real find in this film. She is really great. And I don't want to give away too much of the narrative. Suffice to say that it's almost kind of like a split narrative, in which in the first half what you're presented with is an ostensibly happy family who are nevertheless have their tensions. I mean, there is the father son tension, but which appears to be this the unit appears to be relatively coherent, and then over the course of the first half of the movie, a series of apparently incidental events accumulate and snowball, which then results in tragedy that basically implodes the narrative from within. And the second half of the movie then throws our point of view over onto somebody else. I don't want to give away too many specifics of the narrative, because one of the pleasures of this film is not quite knowing where it was going. I mean, I went into it not knowing very much, and I was a bit sort of bemused at first, because I mean, as Trey Edward Shults told me, this is a sensory experience. This is a movie that it has a colorist credited at the very start during the opening credits, and that kind of tells you ahead of time how lusciously bold and visual the movie is. It also has pretty much a non-stop overlapping soundtrack of soul and hip hop and pop. A lot of Frank Ocean on the soundtrack, Kanye West. So all of this kind of it sort of overlaps each other, and certain songs will appear in certain scenes, and then they'll invade the context of other scenes where the meaning will be sort of perverted and contorted. So a song might turn up in one scene, and then it will turn up in another scene where it's meant to imply feelings of anger, resentment, rage, joy, whatever. And initially at first, I was understandably like sort of viscerally bowled over by how formal the nature of the filmmaking was. I was like, okay, it's certainly formally very audacious, and technically it's very well accomplished. The music editing and the sound editing is terrific. I mean, the songs also work around a discrete score from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, and all of that interweaves together. But I kind of thought, okay, so technically this is very impressive. Is this actually touching me on an emotional level? I think it's a movie that you have to play the long game with it, because as soon as you kind of realise the kind of narrative twists that Schultz is planning, you realise that this is a very wise movie, a very profound one that is very attuned to the contradictions of day-to-day life, and the movie very deftly takes you from scenes of absolute sort of freewheeling euphoria, the sort of the romance of youth, the brilliant way in which we all kind of imagine our lives playing out to a soundtrack of various music hits, be they like classical, soul, hip hop, jazz, whatever. The movie gets that sort of intravenous sense of adrenaline brilliantly, but it carries you from that through to these pits of absolute melancholic despair that are genuinely quite upsetting, quite harrowing. And what you realise that you're watching is a movie that is very much sort of it feels very authentic, and it feels very lived in, and one senses the filmmakers and the actors are very much drawing on experiences of their own lives. I mean, it's interesting, when I interviewed Trey Edward Shults, he said that as a white filmmaker making a film about an African American family, that he basically sort of drew very, very closely on his prior collaboration with Kelvin Harrison Jr. from It Comes at Night, in order to ensure sort of emotional authenticity in what was going on in the story. And I think that authenticity really does shine through. But although the movie centres on an African American family, there is a universality to the emotion. I mean, this touches on issues that affect people from all walks of life, whether it's relationships with one's parents, relationships with one's siblings, relationships with girlfriends, boyfriends, how so apparently minor bad decisions can all of a sudden accumulate and gather some kind of like hideous tragic force, and out of that comes, once the dust has settled, comes a chance for redemption and a chance for new relationships to be formed that we don't necessarily expect. That later on there is an appearance from the always brilliant Lucas Hedges, who is really emerging as a indie film darling. I mean, ever since he appeared in Manchester by the Sea, he's really hasn't put a foot wrong in anything, and Lucas Hedges is really great and really sympathetic in this. I think the real star of the movie is Shults himself. I mean, this is a movie that's unashamedly bold. It kind of, again, it's almost like when it comes at night, one senses how much he was reining himself in, whereas with this, he kind of wanted to sort of paint on the broadest possible canvas, but never at the expense of the characters in the story. And I think that's very, very admirable. I think Waves is a terrific film. It was a privilege to speak to those involved in making it. I mean, I think Kelvin Harrison Jr. is a fantastic actor, and in this he gets a very, very difficult character to play, because he is on one level sympathetic, and yet also on the other hand, those of a certain age will be able to recognise that kind of adolescent torment and angst that leads to a series of bad decisions, but you don't necessarily judge him for those decisions. It is just the nature of the character, and the fact that he can go from being sort of relatively benign to relatively volatile. It's a very, 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 very authentic character portrayal that, again, would speak to people of all sort of races, genders, backgrounds. And he's a brilliant actor. I mean, in 2019 he did Monsters and Men and Loose, and then this. I mean, he is really, really an actor to keep an eye on. But all of the actors are great, and shout out to Taylor Russell as well, playing Tyler's sister. I mean, it's really real fine. She's going to go down as a real breakout performance. So I can't recommend this film enough. I mean, it's certainly left me reeling, and it's left me thinking even a month after I've seen it. So it's called Waves. If you do go and see it, it's out in the UK on the 17th of January. Do drop me a comment here at Kubrick Corner, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.